What the Papers Say, a weekly review of the daily papers. This week, the deputy editor of The Spectator, Brian Inglis.
Good evening. That, they tell me, was me 25 years ago. All our yesterdays catching up on me. I was there as the outcome of a brainchild of the new Granada television, which had started operating in the spring of 1956. I suppose the idea for the programme was really lifted from the New Yorker magazine, which ran an occasional column in those days called
The Wayward Press.
It was usually written by one A.J. Liebling, and it subjected newspapers to the same kind of criticism which they, in turn, regularly dished out to the theatre, the cinema, and, of course, television. A sample from the Wayward Press of that time gives some impression of the New Yorker style. It refers to Dorothy Kilgannon's coverage in the Journal American of the Prince Rainier Grace Kelly wedding.
Miss Kilgallen, her pout deepening to irascibility, also took a few whacks at Lady Nora Dacre, another breveted British correspondent,
But better known to us at the time as a globe-trotting socialite.
whom she characterized as
a noisy type who gets herself barred from the casino at regular intervals for causing scenes.
the fact that the Journal American ran this slur was an inspiring demonstration of its devotion to the cause of a free press. For just a few days earlier, it had been printing Lady Dacre's own comments on the wedding preliminaries.
It seems old hat to us now, but that neat twist of the knife in a newspaper's back seemed quite revolutionary at the time. And it must have appealed especially to Sidney Bernstein, the founder of Granada, and Dennis Foreman, the first producer of this programme, both of whom were only too well aware of the open hostility of most of the British press to the newly established ITV. Going back to what I hardly dare describe as my filing system, I was surprised and gratified to find this memorandum, which started it all.
What the Papers Say.
The basis of the show.
Here in Britain, it began.
The daily press has enjoyed a freedom for many years to criticise anyone or anything it chooses. On the whole, they have avoided criticising each other.
Times have changed. Those were the days when the principle, dog doesn't eat dog, held good. It was rare for newspapers even to mention each other by name. Today, only the Telegraph keeps religiously to that principle, except when it announces gleefully that a rival is increasing its price. But the memo continued.
Most readers regard the newspapers as an article of household furniture and would no sooner think of criticising it than they would a chair.
I'll say things have changed.
The saying, "I saw it in a newspaper," is still tantamount to saying it's true.
Ho-hum.
On occasion, one or two sturdy voices, amongst them those of Aneurin Bevan and Randolph Churchill, have made comments not wholly favourable. From time to time, the Press Council has issued a calculated and sanctimonious rebuke. But never have they...
The newspapers, that is.
But never have they been subjected to a regular critical survey in a medium as popular as their own.
To wit, independent television. But who was going to provide this regular critical survey for the ITV? The IBA, as it was then, had an obsession in its early years with what it called balance. If Tweedledum gave his view, Tweedledee must be allowed the right of reply. The Granada programmers realised it would be next to impossible to find any paragon who would be able to maintain perfect balance, or if there was such a person, he would certainly bore the pants off the viewers. But they had an inspiration.
The weekly journals do this job for their readers, who are in general the leaders in the thought and culture of the country.
Oh, yes?
Granada is now offering the weekly journals an extension of their publishing facilities in a different medium and to a different audience.
And so the three leading prestige weeklies were chosen. The New Statesman and Nation on the left, The Economist in the centre, and The Spectator from the right. And so this mystical idea of balance would be achieved by rotation over a period of 3 weeks. Would the ITA wear it? Yes, they would. But at this point, the project ran into fresh problems. The then editor of The Economist was Donald Tyerman, a distinguished journalist who died only recently. His board, for some reason or other, wouldn't let him do the programme. The editor of The Spectator was Ian Gilmore, who has just been sacked from the cabinet from his outspoken views. In those days, he was also outspoken, but basically he was a proprietor rather than a working journalist, and he decided not to take on the programme. Only Kingsley Martin of the New Statesman said yes. Well, the long and short of it was that I found myself, as assistant editor of The Spectator, selected to take on the opening performance 25 years ago today. Ironically, the producer Dennis Foreman's chief worry, and mine, was that there would be little or nothing to say, that there'd be no interesting news in the papers that week. We knew that some mad government gambling scheme called Ernie was being introduced.
Prize bonds go on sale today.
That week, too, The Guardian's editor, A.P. Wadsworth, died. There was speculation about whether Tom Finney would keep his place in the England team, and that Diana Dawes was separating from her then husband. But it was hardly the sort of stuff to launch a new programme. And then
British moving on Suez.
Armada strikes after Nasser spurns ultimatum.
Big force of troops sail in landing craft at 0 hour.
4:30 a.m.
First wave of Red Devils reported landed.
Commandos a spearhead.
And if that wasn't enough,
The murder of Hungary.
Soviet tanks crush Hungarian rising.
Budapest is blasted into silence.
remember the 5th of November. I'm not likely to forget that one in 1956. Only the previous night, the last message from free, or nearly free, Hungary had come out over the tapes from Budapest, and we led that first program with them. Out of Hungary yesterday came one of the most moving messages that a news agency has ever received. The last signal from the British United Press Office in Budapest before the Russians moved in. Goodbye. We do not forget you. The Russians are too near. Goodbye, friends. Goodbye, friends. Save our souls. Fleet Street was, of course, united in its condemnation of the Russian invasion, but the British invasion of Suez split families, friends, and the press. My own paper, The Spectator, came out against Suez, and so was deemed to have moved from right to centre. We became the middle-of-the-roaders. First Kingsley Martin, and then J.P.W. Malalieu MP, later Minister for the Navy, but also a good journalist, took the road to the left, and John Connell, another good journalist, came in to favour the right. Between us, with occasional contributions from Sir Gerald Barry, former editor of the News Chronicle, we did most of the programmes for the next year. That was 1957, the year Sputnik went up.
Space age is here.
Man-made moon is circling world in 95 minutes.
It was a Soviet technological achievement which caused first incredulity and then consternation in the West. But Giles in the Daily Express captured the lighter side.
Relax, bud. It's one of ours.
In Russia, too, Stalin's successors, Malenkov and Molotov, went down.
Russian leaders split apart in major crisis.
Molotov and others expelled for plots against the party.
They were relatively lucky. At least they weren't executed, as they had killed off Beria after Stalin's death. They weren't even imprisoned. Molotov became ambassador to Outer Mongolia, Malenkov the manager of a hydroelectric plant. Here at home, as the newscasters say, a prime minister was eased out even more gently.
Sir Anthony Eden resigns.
Health.
Not equal to burdens of office.
Eden's tragedy.
Failure, illness. Will the Queen send for Butler?
She didn't. One of the ministers who'd been Eden's strongest supporters over the Suez invasion, Harold Macmillan, had also been the man who'd persuaded the cabinet that the jig was up. This combination of hawkishness and pragmatism impressed his colleagues. It was he, rather than Eden's second-in-command, Rab Butler, one of the Tory wets of those days, who succeeded Eden. It gave Lowe the idea for one of his most engaging cartoons.
Would the gentleman in the hat please smile?
The face peering from the window was Lord Salisbury, who was generally believed to have masterminded the coup which kept Butler out. But within weeks, he was to become disillusioned with Macmillan.
Lord Salisbury resigns.
Opposed to the release of Archbishop Makarios.
Lord Hume succeeds him.
1957. That was the year when the British Army was threatened with mutiny. An attempt was made to merge two Scottish regiments with radically different sartorial traditions. And, as the Daily Herald put it,
Therein lies the rub. What will cover Jock's knees? At present, the Highland Light Infantry wear kilts, the Royal Scots Fusiliers wear trews, and for months it looked as if ne'er the twain would meet. Between them, they found a solution that left honour satisfied. The RSF would take off their trews and wear the HLI kilt, provided the HLI dropped its Mackenzie tartan and changed to the dress Erskine, tartan of the Royal Scots.
Ah, those dear dead days of long ago when our defence policy hinged on compromises like that rather than on Cruise or Trident. 1957 was memorable too for a near breach of the morality laws in, of all places, King's Lynn.
Freeze tease.
Striptease shows at a fun fair in the windswept Georgian Square at King's Lynn, Norfolk, were cut shorter than usual last night. It was snowing.
I can vouch for the fact that there's a direct route to King's Lynn from the North Pole on nights like that. The report said a stripper called Margaret stands
naked while her brother throws axes and knives around her.
and, as she explained,
If we shiver and move any part of our body during a pose, we would lose our licence.
I doubt very much whether the episode would have graced the Sunday Pictorial's pages had it not been for the shivering stripper's name.
Margaret Shufflebottom.
Of such events was the programme composed in those days, but in that preliminary Granada memo, an instruction had been given.
We are not presenting a programme of comment on the news. We are commenting on the way the news has been treated, and also commenting upon the paper's comment.
Let's look back then for a moment at the papers we were commenting on. 25 years ago, the Times still had advertisements on the front page. The late lamented Manchester Guardian was not yet the Guardian. The Express was full size. So was the Mail. Of the others, the Mirror hasn't altered much, nor, of course, has the Financial Times. There was a Daily Herald, which evolved through changes of ownership into the Sun. A Daily Worker, now the Morning Star. There was a News Chronicle, saddest of the Fleet Street losses in this quarter century. There was a Daily Sketch, which was to be swallowed by the Mail. Star, in those days, was a London evening, and no relation to the Daily or Morning Star. The Sundays, the Sunday Times, not then connected with the Times, looked like this, and the Observer like this. But the Sunday Express has changed little. In those days, there was a Sunday Dispatch, a Sunday Empire News, a Sunday Graphic, and a Reynolds News. All are gone. Still, we did have the old Sunday Pictorial, though it's now called the Sunday Mirror, and we had the People, now the Sunday People. And of course, as always, the news of the world, almost changeless in a changing Fleet Street.
Nudist welfare man's model wife fell for the Chinese hypnotist from the Co-op bacon factory.
That was 11 years ago, and if Barry Askew, the present editor of the News of the World, another old boy of this programme, can improve on that headline, we'll send him a bottle of brown ale. The only newcomer to the Fleet Street Sundays during our time has been the Sunday Telegraph in 1961, flourishing where others have failed. A quick look at what the papers cost then and now gives some idea of the ravages of inflation. When we started this programme, the Daily Mail cost twopence, and for those who are old enough to remember these pre-decimal days, I mean that it cost less than a penny. Today it costs 15p. And if you wanted the other way round, the Sunday Times, which cost less than 2 modern pence, is now priced at 7 shillings a copy. Worst of all, the Irish Times, on which I began as a junior reporter, cost less than 1 modern penny when I joined. It's now 27p. The other changes, well, there were no colour magazines in those days. The Sunday Times was the first with one in 1962, and there were no page 3s in those days. Nudity was not sanctioned, except for Jane in the Mirror. And Jane, alas, departed in 1959. Several newspapers then had resident humourists. Beachcomber J.B. Morton was the most celebrated. He lasted in the Express till 1975, but his characters are immortal. Mr. Justice Cockle-Carrot, Captain Foulenough, and of course, Dr. Strabismus, whom God preserve of Utrecht. That kind of column, for some reason, has faded out. Perhaps the biggest change has been in the ownership of the papers. Gone are the giants, Beaverbrook of the Express, Rothermere of the Mail, though his son is still around, Kemsley of the Sunday Times and Empire News, King of the Mirror, Astor of the Observer. As for editors, they've been too numerous to count. Only one sits where he sat in 1956, John Junior of the Sunday Express, now Sir John. For some reason, cartoonists have proved the most durable, especially those in the Express stable. Cummings, Giles, Osbert Lancaster. And another pocket cartoonist, John of the Daily Mail, only just failed to make it into our list. He retired only a couple of weeks ago after 40 years and 15,000 cartoons. He showed Harold Wilson, when PM, hammering this programme. What has unquestionably gone down over the years is the quality of newsprint, not surprisingly in view of the cost. In 1956 it was £60 a tonne. Today it's 5 times as much. In the meantime, many papers have doubled, trebled, quadrupled in size. It's a sobering, an awesome, perhaps awful thought that the Daily Telegraph alone consumes 200 tonnes of newsprint every day. That requires 7,600 prime trees to be axed daily, clearing an area 100 times as big as the soccer pitch at Wembley. And well over 100 trees per day fall to the manufacture of page 3 of The Sun alone. Down, too, has gone the quality of the printing. Either the ink's got blacker or the paper poorer, but we often feel we need dirt money these days to make this programme. Many a good press photographer must be broken-hearted by this kind of presentation. It could be Michael Foote down a coal mine without a candle. In fact, as the Guardian's description reveals, it's
Mrs. Thatcher and her husband Dennis at Heathrow yesterday on their return from the Commonwealth Conference.
down too has gone the accuracy of the typesetting, which is surprising in view of the pay which compositors now get. In the recent battle over pay at the Sunday Times, it's disclosed that the members of the NGA are already getting £106 for a single shift. But looking back, the most striking difference between the newspapers then and now, at least as they were reflected in this programme, is a curious one. Hardly a week passed without the programme containing a collection of comically different accounts of the same event. To take just one example, what the papers said about Prince Charles's first day at school. In January 1957, the school, according to the Daily Mail, was
5 stories high.
the Telegraph,
6 stories high.
the Sketch.
7 stories high.
Prince Charles arrived, according to the Sketch,
In a black Ford Zephyr.
but according to the Herald,
In a green saloon,
Prince Charles arrived at his 5, 6 or 7-storey school in his black or green car at, according to the Herald,
8:55 a.m.
the Times,
9 a.m.
the Telegraph,
9:15.
the Mail,
9:28.
and the Express.
On the dot of 9:30.
What the Prince was wearing naturally got close attention. The Mail,
a fawn overcoat,
the Sketch,
A grey topcoat.
the Express,
His cinnamon-coloured cap.
the Mail,
He was carrying in his hand.
and the Mirror.
He had left it home.
At the school, Charles was put into a class with, according to the Express,
8 other boys.
the Mail,
a dozen other boys.
the Mirror,
16 other boys.
the Sketch.
17 other boys.
There'd been some speculation over what Prince Charles would be called at the school now, and now this was cleared up. He was to be called, according to the Mail,
Plain Charles.
the Express,
Prince Charles by the headmaster and Charles by the other boys.
and the Telegraph.
Prince Charles by both staff and boys.
Precisely what Prince Charles did at school that first day also led to differences of opinion, but that was understandable as the reporters were not allowed to watch. They could, however, record the time of his departure. His first school day came to an end, according to the Herald, at
1 o'clock.
the News Chronicle,
3:30.
the Mirror,
Soon after 3:30.
the Telegraph,
At 3:42.
the Express.
3:45.
This kind of weirdly precise misreporting happened and was used on the programme again and again. We used to get a flood of them sent in by people who watched the programme, but over the years it's declined to a trickle. Can what the papers say claim any credit for the change? I like to think it can, some at least. Editors, still more proprietors, don't like to be made to look silly. They don't like their newspapers being humiliated in the eyes of the general public, and that includes prospective readers who may be turned away. So, back to the original memo. It made an important point when it stressed that the great majority of people read only one newspaper.
The whole newspaper world, with its politics, its commerce, its family relationships, its combines, and its antagonisms, is completely unknown. The gap, therefore, between the critic and the viewer is vast and has never been bridged. The programme will have to start from the simple premise that all the viewer knows is his own newspaper.
For the first time, the viewing public, small then in terms of numbers, but not in terms of a newspaper circulation manager's assessment of where his next subscribers might be coming from, was introduced to the denizens of Fleet Street, not as they like to think of themselves, painstaking news gatherers with their ears to the ground, or even with their eyes to the keyhole, but all too often chancing their arms with speculation derived from pub gossip. I doubt very much whether what the papers say has had any adverse impact on the bar takings at El Vino, but over the years I suspect that it's made reporters and commentators just that little bit more careful to check their facts and their speculations before putting in their copy. By the end of our first full year of transmission in 1957, we were cheeky enough to award imaginary Oscars to the people we thought were the Fleet Street personalities of the year. And Arthur Christensen, editor of the Daily Express, Chris, as he was known to all of us in Fleet Street, whether we'd met him or not, was one of the first 3. According to our citation,
Christensen retired this year after being editor of the Express for 24 years. And although the Express is Lord Beaverbrook's baby, I hardly think it would have grown into the tough and bouncing, if sometimes erratic, fellow that we know today without him.
Express under Christensen was a phenomenon. As I wrote then, to have worked in Fleet Street without working for him or Beaverbrook at that time was like having been in the forces without seeing action. One wouldn't have liked it and one might not have survived it, but without it one felt inadequate. Of no newspaper since can that be said. Christensen then got one of our first Oscars, and there was equally no doubt about one of the other awards. As the citation put it,
There is only one columnist in the dailies whose name counts, Cassandra of the Daily Mirror.
Cassandra, Bill Connor, later Sir William, was already a legend. He'd been writing his daily column for a quarter of a century. was to get the award in the following year too. And so was the third member of our triumvirate, the only one who is still with us, pocket cartoonist Sir Osbert Lancaster, chronicler of the vintage years of Lady Maudie Littlehampton.
Maud, dear, pray explain to me exactly what it is out of which dear Prince Philip is so eager that we should all take our fingers.
The voice of Daphne Oxenford, the longest-serving member of our usually anonymous vocal team. Our voices, as we unkindly call them, have of course been an essential ingredient of this programme since it began. For a time, they weren't permitted much latitude in the way of accent,
Them dears wasn't much fun, Hinny.
as the ITA favoured what was then the poker-faced BBC approach, but that's long gone on both networks. But to get back to the awards, over the years, two names stand out. Osbert Lancaster was 4 times the cartoonist of the year and could probably have had it more often, but for our sense of fair play towards his colleagues. The other name which stands out is that of James Cameron, 3 times an award winner. He actually featured in a characteristic dispatch the morning of our very first programme 25 years ago. He was in Cyprus describing the preparations for the Suez invasion.
It is not a day one had ever hoped to see, nor can one yet begin to guess where will be the end of this day's work. The reporters accredited to the forces had been caparisoned in army uniforms and issued with badges held over from yesteryear marked war correspondent. I am not among them.
Finally, I had no idea, until I saw the list of journalists who have written and presented this programme, how varied and sometimes distinguished they have been. Some have made their mark in other fields, such as politics: Richard Crossman, Michael Foote, Joe Grimmond, David Steele, Ian MacLeod, who, had he lived, might have become Prime Minister. And in the present government, there's Nigel Lawson and Timothy Raisin. And many of the great editorial poobahs of Fleet Street first appeared in this chair when they were members of the journalistic hoi polloi. Some died tragically young. At least one, Nick Tomlin, was killed in action. In all, no fewer than 221 different men and women have presented what the papers say. The great majority were working journalists, and we cannot credit them all. Nor, I fear, can I adequately express performers' gratitude to the production team of this programme. One will have to stand in for all the rest. Peter Mullings, who has directed 542 shows. We performers come and go, some inexperienced, some incompetent, some egocentric, some bloody-minded. Fleet Street has its fair share of these. But somehow, thanks to Peter and the rest, the show has always gone on. As we start our second quarter century then, good night.
This week, What the Papers Say is presented by Peter Patterson.
Good evening. Once in a while, an event occurs which vindicates the press, and it's particularly sweet when it happens in the field of politics. It would be asking too much, I suppose, for politicians to abandon a discredited cliché argument, but I trust that after the cataclysmic meeting of Labour's shadow cabinet last night, we shan't hear so much of the old jibe that newspapers are interested only in personalities and not in issues. That line has been part of Tony Benn's stock in trade for years, that he's constantly misrepresented by the media, that journalists are not interested in his ideas, only in irrelevant personal details. Mr. Benn can hardly argue that Michael Foote's bitter denunciation of his behaviour, as well as his analysis of the weakness of the Benn arguments on policy, was nothing to do with his style and personality. And one can hardly imagine anything more woundingly personal and dramatic than Mr. Foote's challenge to his ambitious colleague to run against him for the party leadership. Fleet Street, which has for weeks been urging Foote to stand up to Benn, fell on the story today with all the justifiable enthusiasm of the I Told You So brigade, and with remarkable unanimity of headlines. Here's the Mirror.
Foote's challenge to Benn.
Fight me.
And the Mail.
Foote throws down challenge to Benn.
Fight me.
And the Sun.
Foote challenge to Benn.
Fight me for the top job.
And the Guardian.
Fight me for my job.
Foote dares Benn.
And the Telegraph.
Challenge stun shadow cabinet.
Fight me.
Call by Foote.
And the Express.
Fight me if you dare.
The heavies seem to have coped best with this late-breaking political sensation. The Guardian's Ian Aitken saw it as a dramatic reassertion of authority by Mr. Foote, and a
bravura tactical coup. By all accounts, Mr. Benn was stunned by the challenge. He was described afterwards as looking like a batsman who has just been bowled by a thunderbolt ball from a West Indian fast bowler. With his stump spread eagle behind him, he was left gazing down the wicket in bewilderment.
From the headlines, I would have thought a boxing simile would have been more appropriate than the cricketing one. The showdown was well described by James Whiteman in the Telegraph. Mr. Foote had told Mr. Benn, he said,
that he had practically been accusing his shadow cabinet colleagues of being men not to be trusted.
This is a hopeless and humiliating position for me that I'm not prepared to accept. We must see who the movement does trust.
Looking startled, Mr. Benn replied,
You misinterpreted all of this, Michael. I voted for you twice for the leadership. This is not a challenge against you.
Mr. Foote replied,
The meaning of everything you have said over the past few weeks is that the shadow cabinet cannot be trusted. I cannot be divorced from it. I look like criminal number one from what you were saying. You are spreading suspicion.
The Times managed to package Mr. Benn's rejection of Mr. Foote's challenge in its headline to give a full account of Mr. Foote's huge statement of his case, and on its back page, newly released from its cargo of small ads, Fred Emery compiled a diary of what he described as Mr. Benn's humiliations of Mr. Foote.
7 months of defiance from Tony Benn.
Emery usefully recalled that Benn was not always so shy about contesting the Labour leadership as he appeared last night.
October the 21st, 1980. In a speech at Queen Mary College, London, Mr. Benn derided the leadership election being conducted by the party's MPs.
What is happening now is not the real election. When there is a real election, I will be a candidate.
What Mr. Foote had done, at a stroke if you like, is to confirm the long-standing attitude of the newspapers towards Mr. Benn. That is not, of course, to say that either he or the newspapers are right, or that Mr. Foote will necessarily succeed in ridding himself of his awkward associate. To the newspapers, Benn is invariably seen as a cynical opportunist, a supremely ambitious egotist intent on personal power, a demagogue who wishes to subordinate the power of Parliament to that of a somewhat dodgily elected Labour Party conference. Sometimes the papers like to hint at a streak of madness, as in this piece the other day by the Mail's Robin Oakley.
Labour's leaders, who have laughed at Benn, along with much of the country these past few years, as a wild-eyed political loony, now find him at the door, about to break in.
Eleanor Goodman, writing in the Financial Times,
Benn's bandwagon gathers speed.
Gives us, in a throwaway line, one of the major reasons for Benn's advancement.
With every headline about Mr. Benn's bid for power,
She writes,
his campaign has gained momentum. His successes over the last few years have been so spectacular that some MPs now seem to credit him with superhuman organisational powers.
Miss Goodman unfortunately shies away from developing this theme of the relationship between the press and Mr. Benn, which has contributed so much to his rise. A relationship which, for once, justifies the trendy adjective symbiotic, in that it is an association of two different organisms which live attached to each other, or one as the tenant of the other, and contribute to each other's support. For where would the press be without Mr. Benn? Devoting a good deal more attention to the failures of and the divisions within the Tory government, perhaps. And what about Mr. Benn's need for the press? For someone who spends so much of his time denouncing the media, Mr. Benn makes sure he gets more than his fair share of time on the platform it provides. Nothing wrong with that, except that other politicians aren't constantly slagging the press. This morning, Mr. Benn received saturation coverage, all right, but not perhaps of the kind he might have hoped for. Yesterday, he secured the block vote of the train drivers' union, ASLEF, which would have made the headlines but for Mr. Foote's challenge later in the day. Eleanor Goodman has been watching Tony Benn's progress round the union conferences and nicely catches the atmosphere.
In a hectic flurry of fringe meetings, Mr. Benn has pressed the flesh and bent the ear of the union's most active and influential NCOs and junior officers, at times leaving the general staffs undercut and infuriated. He now packs these meetings effortlessly. His speaking style is riveting, even for a reporter who has seen its basic elements shuffled and reshuffled. It is fluent and rapid, his pleasant, not too Oxford voice hitting a range of tones, militant, reasonable, humorous, self-deprecating in quick succession. The idealism has the sincerity of a poor friar. The act has been burnished in hundreds of halls until it is flawless, almost exquisite.
The Daily Telegraph is not much taken by Mr. Benn's exquisiteness. In the latest in an innumerable succession of leading articles devoted over the years to the man they love to hate, they observed that in the contest for the Labour deputy leadership, victory for Mr. Benn is
no longer unthinkable.
Perhaps they meant it's no longer unmentionable. Anyway, On with the steady pounding of the telegraph's boot, applied with an enthusiasm amounting to the sadistic.
Together with his bizarre and millenarian opinions, Mr. Benn combines a huge personal arrogance, a lordliness which the Tribune Group, now finding itself used as a personal fief by a politician who waited 30 years to join it, has lately felt rather irksome. Mr. Benn's trouble is that he truly lacks the democratic virtues. Outside a narrow and conspiring group of zealots, he fails to show affection, loyalty, comradeship, give and take, and respect for others. The Coriolanus complex looms large. His natural disruptiveness will have full effect. Conservatives may be complacent about this, but anyone who has ever loved Labour will be outraged.
The literary Mr. Foote must have liked that Coriolanus line, though you might doubt the Telegraph's devotion to Labour. Ronald Butt is a keen Benn watcher, and his latest analysis of the danger Mr. Benn represents in the Times last Thursday was less splenetic than the Telegraph leader, but basically just as hostile to his ambitions. First, as usual, the personality.
Mr. Benn is a skillful orator. He is a populist who does not so much seek to represent the aspirations of the majority when these are feasible, which is the proper but often neglected business of democratic politicians, but is willing to say what his audiences in a given context want to hear. I do not recollect ever having heard him challenge the thinking of the majority in his audience by saying what they did not want to hear, or by invoking the politician's ultimate courage in drawing attention to an inconvenient reality.
Mr. Butt then gets down to the nub of his complaint against Benn, and it's one which quite a lot of people in the Labour Party would like to have an answer to.
What then would he do with power if he got it? Why do so many reasonable men in his own party suspect his emphasis on party democracy and reject his demand that the leader, MPs and party policy should be wholly accountable to the party machine at conference? What we have to fear is that one of our two major parties will stop up all real dissent and argument in its own ranks, creating an unaccountable orthodoxy, which, though it is sustained by the support of mass conference card votes, is actually manufactured by an elite.
Meanwhile, we shouldn't forget that it's not only the press or the Labour establishment who are alarmed by Mr. Benn's arguments. Left-wing MP Frank Field expressed his doubts in a letter to The Guardian on Wednesday, in which he was sceptical about conference resolutions as Holy Writ.
Tony Benn's recent behaviour illustrates both the importance as well as the limitation of party conference in deciding Labour Party policy. For many years, those of us who believed in the constitutional reforms, which included the reselection of MPs, continued to campaign against the conference decision which had endorsed the status quo. Likewise, some of us do not feel bound by party conference decisions on Northern Ireland because we believe the policy to be wrong. What we are now faced with is a group in the party,
Mr. Benn and his friends,
which is prepared to challenge conference decisions when it disagrees with them, but tries to ruthlessly enforce conference decisions on the whole movement when it happens to agree with its own particular preferences. This double talk will not do.
I suggest this is such a conventional country, with such a conventional political system and press, that we never seem quite able to cope with the occasional meteor which flashes across the political sky. I suppose Tony Benn, in the kind of struggle he's chosen, apparently against his own party establishment, can be compared with Lord Randolph Churchill in his bid to make the Tory rank and file his power base, to Oswald Mosley in his contempt for the gradualism and orthodoxy of the Labour Party in the face of massive unemployment in the 30s, and to Enoch Powell with his populist appeal to working people on the race issue. 4 flashes of lightning in 100 years hardly prepares Fleet Street with its conservative instincts to cope with such individuals. Yet there's a fascination, all the same, which impels the papers to respond to such figures, however hard they're being briefed by their opponents. Tony Benn might well win the deputy leadership, and could even replace Michael Foot. Then what? Ronald Butt, at least, has faced up to a further possibility, Mr. Benn as Prime Minister.
It is quite possible that by the next election, political and social circumstances will be such that the politics of the socialist siege economy, which the left will promote to deal with the overriding issue of unemployment, will strike a responsive electoral chord.
And as a footnote on responsiveness, can anyone have much doubt that Benn's constant criticism of the press had some bearing on the decision of Fleet Street to deal fairly and on the whole sympathetically with the People's March for Jobs? The Times even dispatched its deputy editor, Louis Heron, to follow key sections of the march, and he made this comment.
They were not hunger marches, but by today's standards and expectations, they were as deprived as the men of the Jarrow Crusade. They were witness to the grim reality, so easy for others to forget, that 2,500,000 citizens are unemployed, although I doubt that many of them expect that they will move Mrs. Thatcher. One of them said that only 1 million or more marches would impress the Prime Minister, but I was left with a disturbing thought. They probably have the ability to mobilize tens of thousands, if not 1 million, marchers or demonstrators. And if they did, they could hardly be as disciplined and good-humoured. This could be the latent challenge behind the march for Mrs. Thatcher.
In the New Standard, the Spectator's political columnist Ferdinand Mount also expressed sympathy of a southeast-eccentric kind.
These people are from the north, a half-alien wasteland. They may not be short of food, as legend says the Jarrow marches were, but they don't look exactly healthy either. Of course.
Something must be done.
But the trouble is that the public is just as bemused about precisely what should be done as the Duke of Windsor was in 1936 when he uttered those words after seeing the plight of the miners of South Wales.
But away from our domestic troubles to someone else's, one of the enduring delights of newspaper reading.
Mason scandal ousts Premier.
Masonic scandal rocks Italian coalition.
The suitcase scandalo.
My curiosity about our own Masons was, I must say, aroused by these tales from Italy. But no paper made the connection until the Sunday Telegraph came out with a commendable feature spread offering us, on one side of the page,
The Scandal That Is Rocking Italy,
written by veteran Rome correspondent Leslie Child, and on the other, a reaction piece by David Rosenberg.
Dismay among the British brothers.
Rosenberg's article was full of reassurance that our Masons don't behave like those Italians.
Britain's Masonic leaders are deeply embarrassed about the implications of the Italian scandal. The Grand Orient Lodge of Italy, like others in Europe, has long been distrusted by English Freemasons because of its anti-clerical stance and its taste for political involvement. They broke off relations in 1871, when the Grand Orient Lodge no longer required its candidates for membership to take their oath on the Bible. The Italian Lodge was recognized again by English Freemasons only in 1972. A high-ranking Mason explained,
Fraternal relations were resumed because they had met our requirements. They agreed to keep the Bible open during meetings and to swear their oaths on it. Politics were also to be played down. Now we are deeply shocked and offended. We feel as if we have a renegade brother who has not lived up to family standards.
And which family sets those standards? None other, it would seem, than the royal family itself.
The Duke of Kent, the Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge, is Britain's leading Mason. His father held the post until his death in 1942. The Duke of Edinburgh is an initiated Mason in Royal Navy Lodge 2612, but is believed to have declined high office, while Prince Charles, despite assiduous Masonic courting, is thought to be indifferent about joining.
But could an Italian-style scandal happen here, I ask myself, as one does? David Rosenberg tried to be deeply reassuring.
Law and medicine are great Masonic strongholds. The Metropolitan Police has a significant number of Freemasons in key positions. Most lodges in England draw their brothers, who must be 21 and believers in God, from the typical pillars of the community.
And for extra reassurance, Rosenberg quotes James Dewar, author of a book on Freemasonry.
Any secret society has in it the seeds of menace,
he said.
But it is very unlikely that a similar clique could operate here, as the movement is headed by so many people of obviously good repute.
But oh dear, I'd just read Leslie Child across the page describing the list of names of the alleged members of the Italian Lodge as
a who's who of Italian power and influence. 953 names in all, including 2 cabinet ministers, 19 judges, and numerous high-ranking army officers and businessmen.
people of obviously good repute, wouldn't you say? Good night.
This week, What the Papers Say is presented by George Gale.
Good evening. We've heard a great deal about checkbook journalism recently, particularly over the Ripper case. I'm not going into this again, although I do think a great deal of sanctimonious humbug has been written and said on the subject, not least on the Queen's behalf. If the choice is between buying the facts and no facts at all, I'm all for the checkbook. There is, however, another kind of checkbook journalism which is altogether dangerous and reprehensible. This is when the papers receive the checks rather than dish them out. When people pay newspapers to print favourable stuff about them, it's straightforward bribery and corruption. This is precisely what the United Nations has been doing. In order to promote its views on aid to the Third World, the UN and several of its agencies have been paying subsidies to 15 major newspapers, including Le Monde of France, La Stampa of Italy, and the Asahi Shimbun of Japan. I'm glad to say that no British paper has taken the UN's cash, which was to be spent, according to a report in the Daily Telegraph, which is commendably interested in such scandal, to correct
the unjustly poor image of the UN.
Thus spoke Dr. Waldheim, Secretary-General of the UN, no less. He said the scheme
merited the support of all branches of the UN system.
A UN official involved is quoted,
"We were really being hit on the head by the Secretary-General on this. He was strong-arming the agencies to come up with the money."
Which was to be added to a huge donation from a Japanese promoter of powerboat racing. Among the UN agencies which contributed this fund to bribe the press were the World Bank, the World Health Organization, the International Civil Aviation Organization, the UN Development Fund, the UN Environment Organization, the International Labour Organization, the Intergovernmental Maritime Consultative Organization, and last, not least, but worst, UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, a body which, with the solitary exception of the United Nations itself, is the world's biggest and most rotten quango.
Just what does UNESCO do?
Asked Ian Ball in a leader-page article in the same issue of the Daily Telegraph.
There are no fewer than 6 UNESCO Assistant Directors General, each of whom draws more than £50,000 annually in salary and allowances. The Senegalese Director General, Amadou Mahtar Mbow, is eclipsed in the UN Top People's Salary League only by Dr. Kurt Waldheim, the Secretary General. £70,353 in annual salary, plus £11,363 hospitality allowance, and a New York residence provided free of charge.
And all of it free of tax, of course. Mr. Amadou Mahtar Mbow has an even bigger scheme to nobble the press than the appalling Dr. Waldheim. He wants to license journalists throughout the world and to ensure that their dispatches conform to some agreed global code of press ethics. UNESCO is endeavouring to set up a New World Information Order. In today's Times, Rosemary Reiter writes,
In Paris this week, UNESCO has what could be its last chance to convince impatient Western governments that it is more anxious to promote the growth of independent third world news media than to foster state interference in the reporting of news. The 35-nation Governing Council of a new international programme for the development of communications, IPDC, began its first meeting on Monday.
She notes that
the political debate about the freedom of the press, which is destroying UNESCO, will be further polarised.
She gives UNESCO's defence.
UNESCO's spokesmen say there is no truth in the charge that it is seeking to set itself up as the arbiter of what news circulates in the world. UNESCO's support for a New World Information Order, advocated by a group of third world governments, is, they say, wholly benign.
But her conclusion is correct and intimidating.
Encouraged by UNESCO, the New World Information Order is shaping in a way which is incompatible with the free flow of information.
So here we have the United Nations trying to bribe and corrupt the press, and UNESCO trying to license and control and censor it. With a checkbook in one hand and a muzzle in the other, Dr. Waldheim and Mr. Amadou Mahtar Mbow are out to destroy the world's free press. If they had their way, nothing nasty would ever be written about black third world dictatorships and nothing nice about free white democracies. This is the new fascism of the third world, travelling under the aegis of the United Nations. What on earth the United States thinks it's doing, paying a third of the UN's entire budget, I can't imagine. What we think we're doing, coughing up 4.5% of that budget, I don't know either. Except that we are paying, and through the nose, to be bribed, corrupted and subverted by the likes of Dr. Waldheim and Mr. Amadou Mahtar Mbow. Now to more immediate matters.
At about 2:30 last Sunday afternoon, 24 hours before Israel announced its air attack on Iraq's nuclear plant near Baghdad, a flash top-priority message reporting the raid rattled into the Situation Room of the State Department in Washington from the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv.
Thus the Observer in its daylight feature last week, Target on the Tigris. This was the work of
Ian Mather in Baghdad,
Colin Smith in Beirut,
Shyam Bakhtiar in Amman,
Eric Silver in Jerusalem,
Robin Smythe in Paris,
Peter Pringle in Washington,
Sue Masterman in Vienna,
and Robert Stevens and Patrick Seal in London.
They told the tale with excitement and enthusiasm.
The strike at the target was carried out with stunning speed. A French eyewitness, Monsieur Jacques Rimbaud, who had been working at the nuclear complex, said on returning to Paris,
"I saw 4 planes pass twice over the plant. 4 bombs were dropped. It hardly lasted more than 10 seconds. I was amazed at the accuracy. The central building was destroyed, the atomic reactor was damaged, and the atomic energy shelter disappeared completely. It seemed to me that the bombs were accurate to within a meter."
Within a meter? A bomb? No matter, it had been a jolly good show.
On the evening of the attack, Baghdad's diplomatic community was being entertained by the Italian ambassador, Mr. Valerio Briganti Colonna, to celebrate Italy's National Day. As they stood chatting on the embassy lawn beside the Tigris, fountains of anti-aircraft fire suddenly rose all round the city.
It was a beautiful firework display,
said one diplomat.
They were shooting off in all directions, and we realized that something had happened.
Good diplomatic observation, that. The Observer editorially comments,
bombing other people's nuclear reactors to halt the proliferation of nuclear weapons is no answer to the gravest and most neglected threat to humanity.
But then it was never supposed to be that. I prefer Trogg's comment alongside. The Sunday Times commented,
Israel's action is a fearful and menacing boost for international anarchy. What Israel does, others will be encouraged to do in their turn. Because Israel has done it, the inhibitions restraining future aggressors are weakened. Israel has never been slow to accuse others, Colonel Gaddafi, for instance, of terrorism and other crimes. At the same time, it has contrived to win applause for actions of its own, such as the Entebbe raid and the kidnapping of Eichmann, actions whose illegality was offset by heroism in the one case and righteous vengeance in the other.
What had Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin to say for himself? In the Sunday Telegraph, Gordon Brooke Shepherd interviews him. Begin explained how, since last October, for political and technical reasons, the bombing raid had to be put off.
During this time, I can tell you, my friend, I had many a sleepless night. My wife used to say to me,
"What's the matter? What is troubling you?"
And I replied, "I cannot tell you. I must carry the pain and the dilemma of this myself."
But the Israeli children who make for him when he travels around the country convinced him of his rightness.
Once, when I had a group of 6-year-olds gathered round my knees, I suddenly felt a sharp pang here.
At this point, he clasped his hand to his suspect heart.
And I said to myself, my God, what's going to happen to them in 5 years' time when these Iraqi bombs will be ready? They could be destroyed by nuclear blast, just as 500,000 Jewish children were destroyed by Hitler's Zyklon B poison gas 40 or 50 years ago.
Not quite 40 years ago, the gas chambers. But as Gordon Brooke Shepherd says,
for Menachem Begin, Hitler's Holocaust is an intensely felt and ever-present reality. If one understands that, one can understand the man, even when one cannot agree with his methods. To ignore it is to invite total incomprehension, as well as total hostility.
For Begin, the Holocaust justifies everything. Israel can do no wrong. Does he reject peace in the Middle East? Yes. Can he see that the Palestinians are the victims of Israel as surely as the Jews were the victims of Germany? No. Begin criticizes Lord Carrington for preparing to talk peace with Yasser Arafat. We might ask, how can peace be made with Mr. Begin, who visits the sins of a past generation of Germans upon the children of Palestinian Arabs? A terrible story, very well told in Sunday papers, showing incidentally what newspapers can do and television cannot. As usual, bad news is good news for newspapers. Like millions of others, I was casually watching the trooping of the colour on television on Saturday and heard the pop, pop, pop of the pistol shots, saw the Queen's horse start and the Queen bring him under control, saw the flurry in the crowd and policemen rushing through the parade to the spot. What had happened? For reasons best known to the producers, the television cameras and reporters did not concentrate upon the incident at all, but continued with the parade, as did the Queen, with notable poise. She was doing her duty. The producers, cameramen, reporters of the BBC were not, I thought, doing theirs. An attempt, even a fake attempt, on the life of the Queen, and at such a moment, is very big news indeed, as the Sunday and Monday newspapers recognized.
6 pistol cracks ring out. Then the sudden fear. Has the Queen been shot?
The awful moment.
I could see nothing but this lunatic trying to kill Her Majesty. I felt sheer bloody hatred as I reached for him.
Queen's hero. Guardsman Alec grabs gunman as 6 shots are fired.
6 blanks fired at Queen.
Youth, 17, charged under Treason Act.
Shots at Queen. Treason charge.
Some kind of editorial comment, you might think, would be called for, but the Sunday Telegraph, the Sunday Times and the Observer, the so-called heavies, had nothing editorially to say. The populace did better.
Long to reign over us,
commented the News of the World. And it also managed to print a leader page article on the topic.
She always knew something like this would happen.
Exclusive by Brian McConnell, holder of the Queen's Gallantry Medal.
This was awarded when journalist McConnell helped to protect Princess Anne in an attempt by a gunman to kidnap her in the Mall back in 1974.
The Queen always knew that something like this or worse would happen. She told me so. At the risk of breaching protocol and repeating a private conversation with the sovereign, I believe that every subject in the land should know her thoughts on the subject. This is what she said.
We know that one day someone will attack us, but we only think it will happen to us. We did not think it would happen to one of our children.
The News of the World is much criticised, but I thought last Sunday it emerged best on its handling of the story. Not only all the front page, and the leader page, but also page 2, praising the Queen.
Reigning supreme.
She was shaken, but then came that smile.
And clearly showing the course of the incident.
1. 6 shots ring out, and the Queen skillfully handles her startled horse, Burmese.
2. Police race for the gunman as the Queen controls Burmese.
3. Danger is past, and the Queen's first thought is a soothing pat for the horse which carried her safely through.
Good popular journalism. But we've seen some very bad journalism, if indeed journalism it be, in the last few days. On Monday, June the 8th, the Mirror had this slab on its front page.
You can save £6 all this week with the fabulous Mirror cost cutters.
This is a joint promotion scheme between the Mirror and a supermarket chain. A very dubious enterprise indeed. Is this an advertisement or not? It certainly isn't editorial copy. And what happens if the Mirror wants to criticize its promotional partner? Anyway, worse, much worse was to come, for by Thursday last week, instead of saving £6...
£50,000 to be won.
The top prizes are in your Daily Mirror.
See that Daily Mirror tomorrow for details.
Next day, along the bottom of the front page, up went the ante.
£200,000 to be won in the Mirror.
What was going on? Well, look at the Star last Friday.
£50,000.
Roll up, roll up. There's only 3 days to go before the greatest ever Daily Star jackpot.
But the Sun topped the lot. Again, last Friday.
£850,000.
Not only a £30,000 smashing bingo prize.
Not only a £2,000 a day lucky numbers jackpot.
And now, a Saturday sparkler of £10,000.
And so it's been going on all this week. On Tuesday, the Star raised its stake.
It's not too late to start today.
£300,000 to be won.
Pop into your paper shop and join in the fun now.
And the Sun was beside itself.
Bingo! Your Super Sun is a sellout!
The Sun set Britain alight yesterday. Everywhere it was the same story. A massive scramble to buy the greatest 10 pennyworth in Britain. The whole country has gone bingo balmy.
It's not the country which is bingo balmy, it's Fleet Street, or at least the Mirror, the Sun and the Star. The Express and Mail have remained above the fight, distancing themselves from the fierce circulation war which produced this front page yesterday.
Free and easy.
Meet the Mirror's first £5,000 winner.
Have you won £5,000 in the Mirror's great cash bonanza?
It's pretty appalling. The UK Press Gazette, Fleet Street's trade paper, comments,
This is it. Fleet Street has entered the second phase of what could be an action replay of techniques widely regarded as the most costly, painful and regretted circulation war ever conducted by national newspapers.
The reference is to the circulation war in the 30s.
It had nothing to do with journalism, but it was responsible for dragging at least 2 leading national newspapers into financial agony.
So now we see a third kind of checkbook journalism. There's the checkbook which buys the story of the Ripper, or of Jeremy Thorpe, which does no harm and may do good. There's a checkbook which bribes newspapers to carry favourable copy, which is the worst of the lot, and which the United Nations has been corruptly practising. And there's the check which is buying readers. Well, you can buy the truth, you can buy newspapers, but I don't think you can buy readers. They'll come for the prizes, but they'll only stay if they like the journalism. That's what popular journalism, which means successful newspapers, is about, being popular. It's not about bingo. Good night.